Do you still remember me? Would you go to Mars with me? I broke down after seeing her photos. And if that sounds dramatic, good. Because the truth is, the moment felt dramatic, not because of what was on the screen, but because of what it did to the parts of him that were supposed to be untouchable. Here's the thing nobody tells you about being the guy everyone talks about. You get surrounded by noise so loud it starts to feel like oxygen. Headlines, opinions, expectations, people cheering when you win, vanishing when you bleed. And somewhere in that mess, you learn a survival skill that looks like confidence from the outside. You stop feeling in public. Then eventually you stop feeling in private too. Until one night, the world went quiet. No meetings, no calls, no chaos, just a screen in a dark room and a few photos that should have meant nothing. Just pixels, right? Just a face, just a woman living her life. But that's not what hit him. What hit him was the absence of performance. She wasn't trying to look expensive. She wasn't begging to be chosen. She wasn't selling youth like a product or attention, like a currency. She was just there. And something in that presence did what rocket failures, public mockery, and billion-dollar pressure couldn't do. It cracked him open. Because when you're used to everyone wanting something from you, your name, your status, your access of sincerity doesn't feel sweet. It feels illegal. He stared at the photos longer than he should have. Not in hunger, but in recognition, like his nervous system remembered a version of life he stopped believing in, a version where connection isn't a transaction, where a woman doesn't have to audition to be valued, where softness can be strong and strength doesn't need to shout. And then it happened, and the humiliating part, not a cinematic tear, not a pretty breakdown, just that sudden blur behind the eyes you don't expect until it's too late. The kind that makes you sit back and swallow hard like you're trying to keep your pride from spilling onto the floor. Because imagine being a man who can build companies, move markets, bend entire timelines, and still can't engineer the one thing he secretly wants most. To be seen as human, not as a symbol, not as a villain or a genius, not as the topic under a million comment sections, just a man. And the worst part, she didn't even know she'd done it. That's what wrecked him. That the most powerful thing she did was simply exist without asking for permission. So, if you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible or tired of feeling like you have to prove your worth just to be treated gently, I want you to tell me something. Drop a comment with Scene if you've ever wanted a love that doesn't require you to perform for it. The night everything went quiet, it wasn't some glamorous penthouse scene. It was ordinary, almost embarrassingly ordinary, a long day that didn't end just change clothes, a screen that wouldn't stop glowing, a house that felt too large, like it was built to hold a life that never actually showed up. You know that feeling when you shut the door and the silence doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like a mirror. No assistance, no meetings, no chaos, just the quiet hum of a system that's always running, even when you're supposed to be off. He told himself he was fine. Of course he did. That's the default setting when you're the guy people expect to be unbreakable. Fine is a mask you wear so long you forget it's not your face. But that night, the mask didn't fit because loneliness at the top doesn't look like crying into a pillow. It looks like checking your phone even when it hasn't buzzed. It looks like opening an app with no intention just to feel like the world is still moving around you. It looks like living inside momentum so you never have to sit still long enough to notice what you've been starving and then almost by accident saw her again. Not again like a habit, again like a bruise you didn't realize you'd been touching. Her photos weren't flashy. They didn't scream. They didn't beg. They just existed. And that's what stopped him. Because when you're used to being chased, you start to distrust anything that feels calm. You assume calm is a trick, a setup, a strategy. But these photos didn't feel strategic. They felt like a person who had lived long enough to stop auditioning, a woman who had survived enough to know that softness doesn't mean weakness. That being gentle doesn't mean being available to be used. That maturity is not less, it's earned. And for a man who lives in a world of performance, that kind of realness is radioactive. He stared longer than he meant to. Not because he wanted her body, because he wanted her peace. He wanted the way she looked. Like she didn't need to convince anyone she mattered. That's what hit him in the chest. The idea that someone could be that grounded and still be warm. Like she wasn't trying to win. She was just trying to be honest. And the brain does what the brain always does when it's terrified of a feeling. It tries to convert it into math. He started rationalizing it's nothing. It's just a story my mind is making. It's late. I'm tired. I've been running too hard. But then he noticed the thing that ruined the logic. His breathing changed. His throat tightened that tiny amount, like your body's preparing for a truth you weren't planning to admit. His eyes stung, not dramatically, not in a way you can control, in a way that feels insulting. Because how do you explain that? How do you explain that rockets exploding didn't break you, but a quiet woman and a few simple photos did? That's when the real question arrived, sharp and dangerous. What if she saw him the way he actually is, when the cameras are off? Not the myth, not the villain, not the genius, just a man with a name that everyone wants to touch and a heart nobody thinks is real. And once that question gets in, it doesn't leave. It sits there heavy, patient, like it's waiting for you to either run again or finally stop. And that was the moment he understood something that scared him more than failure ever did. He wasn't overwhelmed. He was hopeful. And hope, when you've trained yourself not to need it, feels like falling. Because if he let himself believe she could be real, if he let himself believe connection could be simple, then every excuse he'd used for years would collapse. Love isn't practical. I don't have time, it's safer to focus. People only want me for what I can do. All of it would start sounding like what it actually was, a shield. And shields are great until you realize they also block the things you secretly want to reach you. He didn't message her. Not yet. He just sat there in the quiet, staring at the screen like it was a doorway. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel powerful. He felt human. And somehow that felt like the beginning of something, the kind of woman power can't buy. People are going to assume it was the obvious thing. They'll hear photos and immediately picture glamour, curves, youth, a highlight reel designed to hypnotize. But that's not what got me. What got me was the normal. A candid smile that didn't ask for approval. A face that looked like it had survived real seasons. Eyes that didn't perform. Eyes that knew. Because there are two kinds of beauty in this world. The kind that says, look at me now. It's fed. And the kind that says, we're not afraid to be seen. Your photos were the second kind. And that is rare in a culture that teaches women to apologize for aging. Like time is a crime. Let me say something that might sound too honest. Most people don't want to be loved. They want to be chosen. Chosen as a prize. Chosen as proof. Chosen as a flex. So they curate themselves into a product. They sand down their edges. They rehearse their mystery. And they call that dating everyone I want. But when I scrolled through your photos, I didn't see someone trying to win. I saw someone who had already made peace with herself. And that terrified me, because when a woman is still chasing validation, a powerful man can always stay in control. He can give a little attention and watch her light up. He can pull back and watch her panic. He can become the sun and make her orbit him. But a woman who is grounded, she doesn't orbit anyone. She stands in her own gravity. Your photos didn't say, please choose me. They said, I'm already whole. If you come closer, come with respect. Do you understand how destabilizing that is to a man who's used to being the center of every room? There was one picture simple, almost nothing, and it hit me harder than the rest, not because it was perfect, because it wasn't. The light was ordinary. The background wasn't staged. There was no desperation in it, no thirst, no look what you're missing. Just you existing like you didn't need anyone's permission to take up space. And suddenly I realized something sharp. I've met a lot of beautiful women, but I've met far fewer women who look like they'd still be themselves if nobody clapped. That's what your photos carried. A quiet authority, not the loud kind that screams, I'm high value, the real kind, the kind that comes from living through enough to stop negotiating your worth, the kind that makes you dangerous to the wrong man and irresistible to the right one. And it made me think of all the women who've been told subtly or directly that after a certain age, they should lower their standards. As if maturity means you should accept less, as if being 50 plus means you should be grateful for crumbs. No. Sometimes it means you finally know what hunger feels like and you refuse to eat poison just because it's offered on a silver plate. That's the energy I felt in your photos. Not a woman begging to be rescued. A woman who has rescued herself so many times she doesn't even call it bravery anymore. She just calls it Tuesday. And listen, this part matters. I didn't feel the urge to conquer you. I felt the urge to earn you, because there's a difference between wanting someone's body and wanting someone's trust. Your photos made me want the second one. They made me imagine what it would be like to come home to someone who doesn't need a show, someone who can sit in silence and not treat it like a threat, someone who can hold a man's ambition without competing with it and still not disappear inside it. That's when the thought landed heavy, undeniable. Maybe the thing I've been chasing isn't the future. Maybe it's a feeling I didn't think I deserved. And that's why I broke down, not because you look good, because you looked like peace with a spine. And I don't know what's more addictive than that. If you've ever been misunderstood as too much just because you're finally honest about what you want, drop me 2 in the comments. The engineer tries to solve a feeling. Here's what people don't understand about men who live inside big problems. We don't feel first. We analyze. We don't admit we're shaken away. Look for the cause like it's a bug in the system. So after those photos, I did what I always do when something hits too deep. I tried to outthink it. I told myself it was a pattern recognition glitch, a late-night emotional spike, a temporary scarcity illusion. I even started building explanations in my head like I was writing code. Possibility A, I'm exhausted, so everything feels bigger. Possibility B, I'm projecting what I want onto a stranger. Possibility C, this is just novelty. Another spark that fades when daylight shows up. That's what the mind does when the heart starts doing something inconvenient. The mind shows up like a bodyguard and says, relax, I've got this. But the heart doesn't care about your logic. The heart cares about one thing, truth. And the truth was simple too. Simple for a life built on complexity. Those photos made me want to be a better man. Not richer, not louder, not more admired. Better because they didn't feel like an invitation to chase you. They felt like an invitation to rise. I hated that realization at first because if a woman can pull that out of you without even trying, then she's not just attractive. She's powerful, and power is the one thing I've never been comfortable surrendering. I opened my notes app. I actually did like I could capture the feeling in bullet points and disarm it. I wrote things like, why does this feel different? What exactly am I responding to? Is it her or what she represents? What would it cost to let this be real? And then the most honest line typed itself before I could stop it. She doesn't need me. That line hit like a punch because a lot of relationships are built on need. Need creates leverage. Need creates roles. He provides. She receives. He leads. She follows. He's the prize. She proves she deserves it. It's a script people don't admit they're reading. But they all know the lines. Your photos didn't read like that script. They read like a woman who would look me in the eye and say, I like you, but I won't lose myself to keep you. End quote. And in a world where most people are willing to become smaller just to be chosen, that kind of self-respect is terrifying because you can't control it. You can't buy it. You can't charm it into submission. You can't intimidate it into obedience. You either meet it at its level or it walks away. That's why I kept staring at your photos like they were a problem I couldn't solve. Not because I wanted to possess you, because I couldn't figure out how to approach you without turning into someone you'd see through in 5 seconds. And here's the wild part. Your photos didn't make me feel like I had the upper hand. They made me feel like I had something to lose. Time pride, the persona, that version of me that's learned how to be impressive without being intimate. Because intimacy requires the one thing ambition teaches you to avoid: being fully present, not checking your phone mid-conversation, not half listening while your mind runs 1,000 miles ahead, not treating connection like a side quest you'll get to after the next launch. Your photos didn't demand anything yet. They demanded everything. They demanded my attention. And attention is the most honest form of love we have. So I tried to escape into the usual distractions, work plans, future noise. But the feeling followed me like gravity, because the more I thought about you, the more I realized what I was really craving wasn't romance. It was relief. The relief of not having to perform. The relief of being with someone who can handle silence without turning it into punishment. The relief of a woman who doesn't confuse calm with boredom because she's lived long enough to know that peace is not empty. It's rare. And if you're watching this right now, especially if you're a woman who's been made to feel like your best years are behind you, I need you to hear this clearly. There are men out here who are tired of the games, tired of being won, tired of relationships that feel like negotiations. A man who's built everything will eventually want the one thing he can't build alone, a home inside another person. That's what your photos hinted at, not fantasy home. And once a man tastes that possibility, even for a second, he doesn't forget it. He just gets scared and starts doing math. But math can't measure what you did to me, because what you did wasn't seductive. It was honest. And honesty has a way of making a grown man finally admit, I don't want the next thrill. I want something real. The real fear enters. Here's the part nobody claps for. Because when a man like me starts to feel something real, the world assumes the danger is heartbreak. It's not. The danger is exposure. It's the fear that if I step closer, I won't be able to hide behind the things that have always protected me. Achievement, speed, control distance, because distance is a drug. Distance keeps you safe. Distance lets you be admired without being known. And the second I looked at your photos and felt that crack in my chest, I realized something that made my stomach turn. If I reached for you, I couldn't do it the old way. I couldn't wow you into silence. I couldn't distract you with headlines.